Hi, Lisa.
Hello. Okay, you guys can see that okay?
We see
Slide.
the PowerPoint. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
All right. There's Jason.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you. Yes.
Excellent.
Woohoo.
Exciting.
I know.
Our staging strategies stand out from the competition.
That's right. So we're talking about today, Richard.
Thank you.
Oh man, my shirt is doing the funky thing with the camera.
Oh, it looks kind of normal. I mean, it's a little bit the
It's like
lines that are.
psychedelic. All right, let me go change my shirt. I'll be back.
It's seriously, Jason. It's up to you. It's up to you.
I'll be back.
That's so funny. He's so funny. Hi, Lisa.
Did we start yet?
Well, no, it's so funny. Jason was like, he's wearing a shirt that has like stripes on it, and it was kind of doing this weird thing with the camera. And he's like, I'm gonna go change my shirt.
That's so Jason. I had the worst time getting on. I was having problems with reCAPTCHA or reCAPTCHA, whatever it's called.
I heard you talking about me.
Hey,
You went to change your shirt.
hey, as he's buttoning up.
What's up?
I said that's so Jason.
Well, I'm trying to be considerate of others.
I like it when you do the backgrounds and the hair is doing this because it's no green screen.
Yeah. I actually don't have a virtual. This will be the first time doing the shift with where I don't have a virtual background
We're
because
seeing
I'm
your real
actually
room.
in my office, which is pretty exciting. Pretty exciting to get out of the house and be in my office again.
I know, right?
Which used to be my first home. I mean, I spent, normally I spend way more time here than I do in my actual house. Cat, of course, is very confused right now.
So I need to say hi to Steve Bond, who I see is on the call.
Yes.
Steve, are you on? Can you like unmute yourself?
I'll unmute him. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right? Steve and I used to
he
hang.
wants to be unmuted at the moment. We'll see, but
So we'll see if he's even listening. So we used to hang out together in high school. We're high school buds.
that is so funny.
Isn't
Really?
that small world? Yeah, that's where, like, there were like, I see, we'll make him get on the call. So there were like places where the cliques hung out.
Yeah.
I won't tell you what group Steve hung out with. Oh, look, he's messaging. So we hung out with different groups, but we'd go sit in the middle and hang together when we got tired of all the other groups. We'd just sit on the grass and talk. So we're old buddies.
I can check.
So how are
Kind
you
of the
doing,
role-
Lisa?
Kind of the role I have with Jason.
I said, how are you doing, Lisa?
I'm good. I'm just moving my little thing around so I can see the chat box. Okay, there we go.
What about you, Torres? How you doing?
I'm doing awesome, amazing.
Torres. Steve's saying, oh, okay, yeah, no mic on the computer. Awesome memories. That's hilarious. Okay, we'll talk to him later about the group. that
Okay,
he's in
yeah,
now.
ask him about Barack. He used to hang out with Barry.
Okay. So while everybody's getting on, I just want to let you know that if you did not get the workbook, Cheryl is going to keep kind of posting it as people jump on because you're not able to see what was passed in the chat box. So she'll post it a couple times as we go, every couple of minutes as we start getting everybody on. So it's I'm just going to give everybody maybe one more minute or so and then we'll get going. I usually wait till we have about at least 40.
Cool.
So why don't we, while we're waiting for everybody else to kind of log on, Jason, why don't we talk a little bit about you? And as our guest today, which we're really excited about, if you want to share a little bit about yourself, your background, your real estate experience, and maybe a little bit about how you developed. I mean, I know you when I met you. Really, this is totally your wheelhouse, right? I mean, you're the first person that Chad and I thought of when we were doing this topic, because you really made it such a huge part of your business. I remember how your office used to be like staged, right? And it's just a part of your brand. And so I think I'm really excited about some of the things you're going to share with us later in terms of how that conversation happens with sellers, how it becomes part of what you do.
Cool.
But give us a little bit of your background and history so we know who you are.
All right. So real estate wise, so I started my real estate career back in 2004 in California, Northern California, Sacramento area. And I actually started out initially doing loans, and realized after about 6 months that I definitely did not want to do loans. So I transitioned over to the sales side. So been doing real estate since then. Moved to Hawaii in 2009, and did not get into real estate right away. It's so funny. I had heard so many negative things about Hawaii and how outsiders weren't accepted and how difficult it was to make relationships and stuff. So I figured I'd learn the lay of the land first before getting into real estate in Hawaii, which I did full time in 2012. And been doing it since then. 2016, got my broker's license. So been supporting agents within our brokerage as a BIC since then. And that's how I got into real estate. As far as into staging, so interior decorating has always been a hobby of mine. So in all transparency, no official schooling or anything like that. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. And so when I did it, you know, on the side personally, and then prior to real estate, my background was project coordinating for in construction, commercial construction. And so I worked in interior decorating for one of the largest architectural firms in California, Lionakis, and was working with their design team. So once I did real estate, it just made sense in 2004 that I would marry the two, the design and the real estate together. So before there was ever such thing as staging, and before it was trendy, back in 2004, I was the only agent in all of my area that I could remember that was actually furnishing and staging listings, and been doing it ever since then.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's get into some of the staging stuff. As a reminder, in the chat box, those of you who have joined us later, you can see, so Cheryl, why don't you share the workbook again in the chat box so that if anybody doesn't have it, they can grab it and download it, because that's what I'm kind of going off of. And then Cheryl, if you can kind of keep track of me on muting, people, that would be great. Because I don't know, there's a lot of background noise. Okay, so today we're of course talking about seller staging strategies and how to stand out from the competition, and really why it's important and why it's relevant and why do we care, right? What is it? How does it really affect our business? How does it help us provide a higher level of service to our clients? What does it really do for us? And then we have Jason, who's a perfect guest to really be able to share some of the things that he's been doing as we go. So the main ideas that we're going to cover today are perspective on staging, convincing your sellers to stage, what that looks like, options for the staging consultation, evaluating the house, implementation of staging, and then staging an empty house, and maybe how that's different than some of the other things that you do when you have pieces in there to work with. So first is perspective. So the benefits, what are some of the benefits of staging? Staging is your ticket to get your listing sold. In a shifting market, which we're seeing a lot of movement happen right now, there is more competition than ever. Now, right now, we still have pockets where we have limited inventory. Part of this is going to be applying this strategy in any markets like Jason has done, and that consistency of the value that he provides. And then, of course, another reason would be, how do you, when inventory and as inventory opens up, which we started seeing condos open up and days on market get longer, at least here, how do you set yourself apart, right? How do you sell it faster for more money? So how do you stand out from the competition? Staging is non-negotiable in many parts of the country. It just is what you do as part of your job as an agent, and sellers expect it and know it. Agents like great looking homes. They're easier to sell. So why is it important that an agent likes the home? I mean, it's really for the buyer. However, we know how we get when we see a property that we think is a great fit for somebody, and we can get really excited and really behind that, and it shows really well. And we know that buyers like to buy properties that are staged. Buyers are looking for value, so that helps show them value. And then staging also can really enhance your reputation as an agent. I mean, again, when I look at Jason, I'm like, man, that guy is really good at staging. And it really does, even though he does a great business, as a result of just in general being a great agent and the way that he works his business, it's definitely an added thing that I go, this guy is really good at that. And you kind of get to know that in the market, the agents that their listings always look really good, and they market really well, or they show properties in their best light. I mean, you can see where their expectations are when you have agents that have consistency like that in your market. Okay, so Jason, is there anything you want to add? So on your booklet, if we just go back to your course, page 7 and 8. So one talks about the issue and some of the things we just covered, and what is important, and how staging can become a marketing tool for you, and then what you can do as the solution to stage. So buyers gravitating towards listings that look good or in move-in condition, real estate agents, we talked about that, like great looking homes, and buyers looking for value. Jason, is there anything you want to add about those points?
So I, of course, am a huge advocate of staging, and for a few different reasons. And please, you're welcome to stop me, Lisa, if I'm jumping ahead. But statistically, it's there's a national staging association or society that tracks all the stats. But statistics show that stage homes generally have a significant lower days on market, and they have a higher sold to list price than their unstaged counterparts. That's just the way it is. And as far as why, well, the expectation, two-edged sword. So HGTV, has all these amazing shows on television, but what it does is it sets up buyers' expectations to what they expect. And you're right, the expectation is for properties to look like a model home. So why I feel so passionate about it, besides the fact that it's effective and it works, the reality, guys, is, we are salesmen, and our product is the homes that we are listing. And if we look at marketing in general, marketing 101, regardless of the product that you're selling, when you look at marketing, whether that's advertisements on TV or anything, really the overall objective of that ad is to appeal to the consumer's emotions. And so we know that real estate is, in fact, for most part, even, investors, it's an emotional process. So the objective of the staging is to appeal to our buyers' emotions and to trigger certain emotions. In particular, the impulse to buy now and the impulse that they just have to have it. So,
Mhm.
so that's what it is. Staging is just another marketing tool, and highly, highly effective, because it works.
Yeah, I love that. So a couple things that I heard you mention there that I thought were great is in the world of HGTV, right, which has completely changed and developed over the last several years. I mean, where you were at when you started doing real estate and nobody was doing staging to now every show on TV, you know, that really makes a difference. And that is an expectation that people have now that they may not have had before. And you mentioned model homes. I mean, why do we think developers do that? Why do they create model homes and stage them? Well, because it works. And then appealing to that emotion is, that's a really good takeaway, because it's another way. And we know that, that emotions make people act, right? Logic makes them think. It's a bold law. Logic makes them think, emotions make people act. And so if you can appeal to that emotion, which a lot of really good agents do, obviously it's just guiding them to where they want to go. That's gonna be more of a reason they're gonna buy now and move faster. Because
Absolutely, because exactly, because when you trigger those emotions, is, as you say, those emotions will trump reason, and
Totally.
so that's the objective.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about convincing your seller to stage, because we're getting them to the goal that they want. So number one, get the listing. We have to get the listing, and Jason can speak to this in a little bit too about how that helps him get a listing. It can be a sensitive topic, and it says don't risk losing customers over what they may perceive to be unnecessary or insulting recommendations. So this course is designed to really give you the perspective and the vehicle and the fuel to take staging and understand the value of it, so you can share that with the client and they can be on board with it. Because what I find with agents, and maybe you guys have found this too, I'd love to hear if you've ever had this experience, anybody on the call, is where you start talking to your seller about staging and they don't understand, and they go, well, this other agent wouldn't make me, I don't want to have to stage, I don't want to spend the money, I don't want to whatever. That's where they don't understand the value of that, because maybe you don't, or you haven't done a great job at conveying that. And so maybe you backpedal and you go, okay, well, we won't stage it, or no, you don't have to spend that money. So has anybody ever experienced that, where they get pushback from a seller about staging or spending more money to do that? Anybody? You can use the little hand raise thing.
Lisa.
Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, I had a $2.5 million listing, beachside North Kalaheo, and it's a beautiful, beautiful home. But the owner had some emotional ties to some of the elements that were in it. She had a beautiful open area that she had partitioned, and it almost looked like an art museum when you walked into it. It was all divided up, and it was beautiful, but it just had that vibe of being in an art museum rather than being in a home and welcoming. So it was a very difficult conversation to have with her. She also had a hammock with a bunch of stuffed animals in them that were an emotional attachment to her husband. Anyway, we finally got her to agree to remove all those items, but it was a very, very long path. And we did have, you know, like you're saying, the emotional ties to it. We came close to losing the listing over that. And it ended up, when we finally put it on the market, it sold in 6 days for over asking. But it was a tough road.
Yeah, that's a really good example too, because you're actually talking about where they already had stuff, right? It wasn't a blank canvas, which is very common, where they're already going to have things in the home, especially if they live there or it's rented. And how do you work with that? And you were kind of smart enough to see, or sensitive enough to know that gave it a feel, a certain feeling. And that feeling is important when you're talking about emotion and getting buyers to move, and it wasn't quite going that direction. So great. Congratulations for having that conversation and successfully being able to overcome that. And then being able to
just one more point on that. I think that was very helpful was we hired a third party to stage, and that third party verification was pretty much what she needed to hear. You know, it was a female stager. I mean, I find that a lot of stagers are female. But she identified more with her than she identified with my kind of prodding her in that direction. So I think that was very helpful.
Okay, so that's another great point, is sometimes having a different third-party validation really helps. Now you can do that either by having another person that's an expert in that area. You can also do it with data, right? With content, which we've talked about in some of the calls previously. So I think, Jason, you'll probably speak to that when you talk about what you provide to share with sellers. So yeah, thank you for that, Daniel. Appreciate that input. Okay, so your ability to get people to stage the home is going to have a direct impact on whether the home sells, how quickly it sells, and at what price. So tips for discussing staging, and in your book, we're going to talk about page 15 in a minute. Inform the sellers that the return on investment will be higher with staging, and that you'll only recommend changes, or somebody that comes in may recommend changes that promise a return for their time, effort, and money. And there are things that you can do that are kind of minimal staging, or there's levels of staging depending on the situation and what they have to work with. Give real examples, because that really helps. That's what we did on this was like a $4 million listing.
1576.
Hang on, let me just.
957.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
the last time we,
Cheryl, I need your help on muting people. Okay. So, because they're not coming in muted. We had a listing appointment with sellers, and it was like a $4.2 million listing. And what got them really pushed over in the staging conversation was an example that we gave them. We actually gave them a recent testimonial of a situation of a property we had listed, and it was actually listed previously with another company and it wasn't staged. And it had been on the market for, I don't remember how many days, but it was a long time. And so we were able to show them the data. We said, this property was on the market for X number of days. It wasn't staged. This was the price point they were offering. We came in, this is what we did. And it was pretty minimal, but we showed them that, showed them the staging, showed them how much it cost, the seller, and then what that return on investment ended up being, which was, I mean, that price point was a little bit less. I want to say it was like 750 to 800 on that one, but I mean, it was a significant return on investment for them. I want to say it was 20% or greater. I mean, so, and Jason can maybe share what the numbers are. I don't know what the average is, but I think the real examples is huge, because that shows them and it gives them the confidence to move forward, because other people have done it and it paid off for them. And then gauge their reactions and adjust your presentation accordingly. So maybe they're not open to level 3, but they're open to level 1 or level 2, right? So if you look at your page 15, and then Jason, if you want to jump in there, that would be great. This is kind of a cool sheet that talks about interest levels in staging. So, and if anybody doesn't have the booklet, either Cheryl can repost it, or she can email it to you directly if you put your information in there, and I'll check the chat box in a minute. So the level of interest in staging, you have resistant, right? They are not interested in staging and want their home to sell, quote, as is, which we hear that a lot. And then it kind of gives change direction. It gives you a little scripting. It's your house and I can understand your feelings, which probably is what Daniel had to start with. And Jason, you can relate, where it's, okay, you have to validate where they're coming from and their feelings. Then there's the receptive. They've heard of it, maybe appreciative of their benefits, and they're ready. And then basically it kind of helps you and tells you how you can react to that. So any additional input, Jason, on these levels? Do you have your workbook, the levels of interest in staging, or anything we just discussed?
Yeah, so I really appreciated the previous slide, which discussed about being careful not to be insulting in your recommendations. As Daniel mentioned, a lot of times homeowners are they have very strong feelings about, you know, certain furnishings or the way their house is set up, or just their lifestyle, and not wanting to have any intrusions to that lifestyle. So so my point to that is, when you're having this discussion, be very careful in regards to your choice of words when you're talking about their personal belongings. So that's the first caution. Moving to the next slide. So yeah, when I am discussing staging, the most effective means that I have found is just sharing a visual example. So because I've been doing it for so long, you know, I have many examples that I share. You know, for those of you guys that are doing staging currently, if you do not have a before and after video, I would encourage you guys to do that ASAP. So whether that's your next project or an existing project, do a video empty, or if it's, you know, furnished with their furnishings, and then do an after once it's all done. Whether you do that with a video or you do that with photographs, but it is extremely compelling when you can sit the before and after before a seller and just role play with them. If they were a buyer and they were looking at a property and they saw this and this, you know, which one would be more compelling? And they will always pick the stage property. So that's really huge. As far as the level of interest, you know, so when I'm having that discussion about staging, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, Lisa. It just so happens I have 3 stages or levels of staging. And I share those with the consumers. So, you know, the very bare minimum basic is we're depersonalizing, we're decluttering, and we are rearranging their own furnishings in such a way so that there's a better, you know, flow within the property, or that once it's photographed, it'll photograph more favorably. So that's the bare minimum. And then, let me backtrack a little bit. And of course, staging is a choice. You know, they don't have to, you know, go with staging. And if they don't do staging, it's not going to sell the house. But again, it's all going back to that lower days on market, higher sold price to list price. And then it makes buyers less, I have found it makes them less picky when they're doing their J1. So anyways, going back to the levels. So that's level 1, the decluttering, depersonalizing, rearranging of existing furnitures. Level 2 is what I like to call a staging blend. So we'll do that depersonalizing, decluttering, rearranging furniture, and then I'll also bring in, whether it's furnishings, whether it's decor, but I'll bring in some staging stuff, and we'll do a blend. And then the top level staging is, you know, where I practically move in. So I bring in all furnishings, all decor, and we make the house look, in fact, like a model home. So I explained the levels of staging. Of course, you know, whether or not the property is occupied is going to determine which part of the conversation I'm going to spend more of my time on. But I share with them their options, share with them the results of their options. And then in the end, I mean, they're the ones that have to live in the house. So I you know, tell them the advantages and disadvantages. And once they acknowledge that, then I make them own whatever their decision, because the results of what we do or what we don't do, they have to live with that as well. And I want them to own it.
Great. That's great. So those 3 tiers help us too, right? To figure out what does that all include. And maybe people may have questions later about like pricing and all that, and we can get into that later, or how you determine that and have that conversation with them. I'm just going to go to the chat box for a minute. There's some stuff in here. So Steve says, is there a study that correlates higher prices with staging? Facts that they can share. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. I mean, you can answer that, Jason, though, if you want.
So I'd be more than happy to circle back to that a little bit later, because so yes, there is. I failed to jot it down, so I'll have to get that, and then we can pass it on to everyone. But yes, there's, as I had mentioned earlier, there is a national staging association that keeps track of those statistics. And
I think I added them in here later.
Yeah, there's actual data for that.
Yeah. So yeah, I have those resources, which we'll talk about later. And then also NAR's, I believe that NAR's consumer report that comes out every year has information about staging in it as well. So you can pull that from NAR's website. But there are two main kind of staging companies that are kind of, or
Yep.
staging associations that are national, which
Yep.
we'll address.
Correct. Yep.
And then there's actually like, and maybe you can speak to this too, I don't know if you have any, like there's like certification programs and designation, or like, you know, certifications and designations that you can get that really teach you, there's classes that you can take that kind of teach you that stuff as well, these associations have.
Yeah. In fact, I believe one of the associations does.
Okay, so I'll show you guys that in a little bit. And then Anne Marie says, do you find that sometimes you can stage a house? Yes, so he pretty much answered that, I think, with the items that are already there. That is one of those tiers, and certainly depending on the situation. I mean, in Daniel's case, an example that he gave, it was not helpful to have what they had in there, but okay. Isla, yes, you can find that in the Accredited Staging Association. Thank you for that. You're a professional stager too. Okay, cool. That's great to know. She also has forms she can share. That's great. We really appreciate that. And it's the best to have a third party to give the owner that information. People are less emotional when someone else is telling them to declutter and move things out than their agent, which Daniel addressed too at times. I think that can be good. I think Jason also is a good example, and you too as well. I mean, if you're a stager, I mean, having that additional person as a validation is good. Although I think, Jason, you do it yourself too, so we can talk a little bit about that. And I think in most cases, maybe the agent isn't going to be accredited or have that background that you two have. So that may be a different way that they want to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have somebody help them. And yes, you can stage your own things. Okay. Joelle said, okay, so then there's people posting saying to send that. That's great. Isla, that's great. And then Cheryl posted the workbook again. Daniel, I always say there are two elements to selling: price and product. Staging makes your product perfect. Love it. At least close to it. NAR says 10% increase in price, I believe. So yeah, you can look that up. That's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so next is explaining staging. Talk about what staging is, because a lot of times owners, they have a misconception. I mean, what they think it is, what they've heard, how much it costs, what they have to do, and how humbug it is in terms of just inconvenience. So I think just the lack of understanding of that, right, is makes it harder. Because so once somebody really understands, it may feel a lot easier than they thought, or make a lot more sense than they thought. So give them printed information, have materials, supply a checklist for the process. And then we also wanted to mention, have in those of you who are in or have taken KWU's Ignite training class, there's a great toolkit in there that has forms and checklists and things as well. So some basic stuff that's in there that you guys can grab, or those of you who have access to KW Connect, you can grab those. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about convincing your sellers to stage. Can
I chime in
yes,
real
Jason,
quick?
please.
I'm sorry. Can we go back to the last slide? There's one thing I want to touch on there real quick.
Yes.
So in regards to explaining staging, what it is and what it is not, because this is actually a big misconception amongst many of our colleagues, amongst agents as well. So staging, what it is and what it isn't. So some are under the impression that if you put one chair, one little plant, one piece of artwork in a corner in a room, and then, hey, this is staging. Please, I don't mean to offend anyone. Any type of furnishings or decor that would improve the space will definitely make the property show better. But that's not staging. Staging, when I describe staging to a consumer, I refer back again to that model home. If they're visiting a developer and they go through the model homes, a staged home is one that looks lived in, and that's decorated tastefully to maximize the floor plan and the lifestyle that someone could enjoy in that space. So Again, staging is not using little props. No, that's not staging. Staging is actually where you furnish and you decorate the property.
Thank you for that. Okay, and in your course book, your workbook, it talks about explaining staging further, and it has like a little tip. It says honesty pays off, and whether or not your sellers decide to stage, like Jason said, it's a decision, be upfront anyway about what needs to be done, so they're aware, because then typically what happens is you give them that information up front, and then buyers will typically confirm that, right, when you get the feedback from them, and focus on why the house, you know, the focus stays on the house and why it hasn't been sold, and what you guys discussed versus, you know, you not doing a great job. Okay. Set
Lisa?
expectation. Yes.
So I just wanted to make a point to reinforce what you just said is the reason why I say that there are two elements to selling the house, price and product, is because I explained to them, if your product is perfect, then if we're having a hard time selling this property and we know what days on market are, we're past our days on market, then there's only one thing holding us up, because we've got professional photography done, the house is staged, the house is looking as good as it can. So there's only one element, and I think that makes it a lot easier to approach a price reduction if need be.
Love it. Totally. Great point. Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. So on page, I do want to point out that you have on page 19 and 20, there are some scripts and dialogues, which is, I usually include those in your booklets to give you guys some help and guidance. And a big objection handler script is when somebody says, can we sell the house as is? I mean, how many times has anybody been asked that question about selling as is? Anybody raise your hand? Is this a question that you ever get asked? So there's a couple of scripts in there that I just wanted to make sure you knew were in there that are good responses to that. There's also one for, we're moving out, why should we spend any more money on this house? Okay, so there's objection handlers on that as well. And then on page, so on the next page, 22 in your workbook, I wanted to have you guys just go through this little exercise, which says, are you skilled at convincing your sellers to stage? And it says areas to consider: discussing staging, explaining staging, taking a consultative approach, scripts, setting expectations. So this is just a good benchmark of where you're at today and what opportunities there may be for you to improve, to have these conversations, first of all, and then being able to explain those. So go ahead and just jot down maybe an area in there of potential improvement or opportunity, and then what you're going to do, what your action would be to take to be able to get better at that. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to do that, and then feel free to share your answers in the chat box, or I'll ask you in a couple minutes, a minute to go ahead and share that with the group, but you can put it in the chat box as well. Okay, who has, wow, way less of you are on video today. What is that about? Is it because Jason's a stager and you're like, I don't want to see my background? You know, you can use virtual backgrounds, you guys, or you may be multitasking, hopefully not. Thank you for those of you who do have your video running. So tell me, it's nice to see faces, at least I have you, Jason. So talk to me, you guys. There's Robert, yay. So tell me what you came up with. Give me a couple of areas of improvement and what action you're going to take to improve that. You can, sorry, you have to unmute probably, which is the mic in the lower left of your screen, or you should, or your space bar. Talk to me or put something in the chat box. So anybody providing statistics now about staging? Is that an area you can improve? Who's got that one on their list?
Lisa.
Yes, Daniel, my star student today.
I think it's interesting. I have great respect for people that do their own staging because I used to do it myself, and it involves a huge commitment. So big props to Jason, I wanted to say. But one thing that I realized after doing it for several years myself, probably like almost 10 years, was that there is a lot of expense to storing the items and doing it yourself. So one of the things that I did to improve was I found somebody who was a more affordable stager who I thought was absolutely on fire as far as what their quality of staging was. And I have gone that route now, and I've sold all the items and got rid of my storage locker, which saved me a huge chunk of change. So for anybody considering doing it themselves, there are a lot of things to look at.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is. It's an undertaking. I mean, he's developed that, and that's been a specialty over the years, and inventory and all of those things for sure are things to consider. So yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I have on my list too is again, like the gathering of the statistics. So an area of improvement is just being consistent and having that conversation with every single listing appointment. I mean, building it into your listing presentation, your pre-listing packet, really studying those scripts and dialogues around staging as an objection handler when people don't understand it or not agreeable initially, and then just having more of the printed materials like Isla was talking about, or again, Jason has, is having something that you can refer them to. So those were a couple of things that I came up with. Joelle says, I have it on my list, for sure, I have it on my list. Okay, gathering statistics. And then Robert, where do we find the stats to provide? So we talked a little bit about that, Robert. We're gonna revisit. I mentioned that I think NAR's consumer report has it, and then we're gonna give you a couple of resources of staging associations that gather that data that you can use as a resource as well. So that's a good question. Anything else to add, Jace, before we move on? Okay, so set expectations, be diplomatic, see things with the buyer's eyes. So it actually talked about in your booklet, watch HGTV shows on selling and staging, because you do learn a lot about that, and you know what buyers are looking for, visiting model homes. We already kind of talked about that and how important it is to really see things from the buyer's perspective and really ask the seller, right? A good thing is to say, hey, have you bought a home? And when you bought this home, like talk to them about their own experience and have them start to see things as a buyer, because I think that perspective really does change when they do that. Okay, options for the staging consultation. How did I end up with this little yellow thing? I don't know. Anyway, you guys can live with that. Okay, options for the staging consultation. So now we're going to talk about doing yourself or having somebody else help, right? Which is some things we've talked about. So the pros about doing the staging consultation is you'll spend more time. This is just the consultation part, and then you have the implementation. You'll spend more time with your sellers. So for relationship building purposes, having that conversation is good. There's no monetary expense to that and on your part. And then you have control over the finished product. Cons, you could potentially become the bad guy. It may cost you more in time, which you could otherwise spend lead generating, getting more business than it would to pay for a staging consultation. And you may not have the skills or resources to stage different types of homes. That's just not what your specialty is. And then anything to add to that, Jason, on the pros and cons?
Yeah, so on the cons, becoming the bad guy. So it's interesting. I think it's just being able to build that rapport with your sellers and that candidness that you guys can be open about it. It reminds me of I had two separate occasions where sellers were totally on board with the staging. And in both instances, we were doing a blend. And, you know, one of the conversations that I have with my sellers who decide to do a staging blend is that the staging, you know, I prepare them that, you know, it may not necessarily be their particular style, and that's not the element that we're going for. I'm not there to decorate their home. I'm there to furnish the property in such a way that would look the most compelling and be the most marketable when prospective buyers are looking at it online. And so with that, you know, the staging decor and style may not necessarily be their personal style. And I get that and I understand it and I want them to acknowledge it. But again, it's just a means to an end. And so yeah, no problem, that's fine. And then we started the staging the property and got pretty much done. And on 2 separate occasions, the wives pretty much had a nervous breakdown. Like they just could not, they did not care for the staging style at all. So in that instance, you know, I was the bad guy. So, you know, we made adjustments. We kept the staging plan and overall palette and just changed out a couple of the pieces. And in the end, you know, we got the results that we wanted as far as the, you know, offers and days on market and stuff, which made them feel better. But yeah, sometimes it's another sensitive dance and conversation that we're having with our sellers.
Awesome. Okay, so tips for doing it yourself. Study the principles of staging, and for more information. So these are the websites that I found, and I don't know if there's any additional ones, but there was stagedhomes.com, and then IAHSP, which was International Association of Home Staging Professionals, I think is what that one stands for. And then there is a QC Design School, which had home staging and some other training classes, I think, on there. So check those out. Let's see, maybe if Cheryl is still on. Cheryl, can you put these in the chat box? These 3 things in the chat box for me?
Yes, I will. Just leave it up long enough that I can write it down.
Okay, or you actually have the PowerPoint in your email if you want to grab it from there. Totally up to you. It doesn't have to be right this second. I just want to make sure we have that. Okay. Prepare checklists. So again, those associations typically have, I'm sure Jason has a checklist. I mentioned there's a checklist in KW Connect for those of you who have access to that in the Ignite toolkit, I believe it is. And then you're going to also have some really cool stuff in this packet, this workbook that we haven't hit yet. So there's some really, really good resources in here on checklist items. And then develop a network of professionals for jobs that you might need to have them use, painting, carpet cleaning, landscaping, because sometimes we're not just talking about interior, there's curb appeal, exterior stuff too that you may have that's on your list that a lot of you use anyway as a checklist for sellers. Even if you're not doing the full staging, you usually give them something, or they need to get a bid on something, or they say, I wanted to fix X. So just kind of have that so you can help be the resource or the source of the source. I mean, you have to be careful about who you quote recommend, right? You can say, I mean, my broker hat on, I just always tend to say, these are people our clients, past clients have enjoyed working with. Not like I'm telling you to use this person because that's who I recommend. And by the way, if they mess stuff up, you can come blame me. So just to be clear on that. Okay, Cheryl's putting that in the chat box. For those of us who don't have access to Ignite, can you send that doc? Yeah, let me, Daniel, I'll pull the, let me just make a note to pull the sheet from the toolkit that deals with staging, and we can email that out to you guys. Okay, and then Cheryl put the other thing, IHASP and Stage Homes. Okay, thank you, Isla, and you're welcome, Daniel. Okay. So let's go to options for the staging consultation. And it said train your employees. I mean, I added team members just because many of you may or may not have employees. It's not uncommon for large teams, but for smaller groups or individual agents, you typically wouldn't have an employee, at least not in Hawaii. And then, so you could have a team member or somebody else that you work with that does it. So you can train that person to your standards, have them control over the finished product. So you're not spending the time doing that with the client. And sellers appreciate specialized consultants, which probably is part of some of what you guys were talking about earlier. When you do have a third party person or their specialty is just that, sometimes that can be really helpful. And then you don't have to deliver the bad news, right? You can have a person come in and just say, well, this is what you need to do. And you're like, well, I don't know, I didn't say it. You know, they do. And then cons, though, are depending on their role in the team, it may cost more in time than to pay somebody, or they may not have the skills, again, to stage different types of homes. Okay, tips for training somebody else to do it would be, so say it's somebody you want to add on your team that's doing that or specializing in staging, or maybe you already have somebody that does that for you or shows your listings for you that you can add into the slot. They can shadow you on the listing presentation and the staging process. You can supply them with your checklists and reading materials, explain the procedures, hold them accountable for results, follow up on their work by asking your sellers to evaluate the service. So is there anybody on the call that is looking at doing this or has a team member that they already have doing this or that they might want to add? I don't know where some of you guys are at as far as your structure. Okay, if there is, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of skip ahead of that because I don't know that that applies to a lot of you. And then this is using professionals. So the pros to that are top-notch quality, right? That's all they do. They keep talking about delivering bad news. I mean, I think we have to actually change the slides to change everybody's mindset that it's not bad news. It's not. It's, right? It is what you make of it. Now, people may perceive it that way because it's an additional cost, but just so you know, it's however you look at it.
Lisa?
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting, but one thing that I always say is that I find that it's important enough that I will pay for the staging myself, as long as we come to an agreement on price and where we're going to be priced. That you know, if a certain days on market hits, then we have to continue the stage. We can opt to take that off if they want, but you know, I find it important enough that I'll pay for it myself. So that a lot of times, that whole argument.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally up to you. That can be part of your value proposition, or because you know it helps your property sell, that you take listings that you take for a higher price and in shorter days on market, you know, then that could be an investment for you. That makes sense. Isla says, if I just want to add that if you do it yourself or hire someone else, make sure you hire someone with insurance, water damage, fires, theft. You don't want your client to be liable for that. There is staging insurance, FYI. Great, good tip. Homeowners react more quickly when a professional delivers the news. When an agent does, it's just typically they have their own props and storage facilities, so no overhead costs for you, which was discussed. The cons, you relinquish part of your perceived value in the eyes of your seller, and covering fees, their fee can be expensive. We just talked about that. And then you have no direct control over the finished product. I mean, that may or may not be true. So those are some of the pros and cons. Okay, and then Jason, you can just jump in if there's anything that you want to add to these. Tips for hiring a professional before choosing a stager: learn their reputation, visit a listing currently on the market that was staged by someone you are considering working with. I mean, you want to see their live results and what that looks like. Go over your expectations and the standards you expect them to achieve and maintain. Just a little thing on the stager you work with. Yeah, I was looking at hiring a stager. This was years ago on the Big Island. And yeah, I went to their website. Fortunately, they posted pictures of previous homes they had staged on their website, and it was incredibly clear and helpful that they were not the person that I wanted to work with. So I think that's a good thing, is you can eliminate the people that you don't want to work with too. Go over the expectations and the standards. Hire the stager for an hour of consultation after the listing agreement has been signed. That way you can get that done right away, which I think is a really good tip. and then providing the consultation as a free service to the seller, and you could pay the seller a nominal fee for the consultation, which you can actually use things like that to help you get the listing too. I mean, you can use it as a tool to get a listing if you don't have the listing yet, right? Where you add that seller, that stager as part of your team, and they come and talk about the value of staging, especially if you're going to pay for it as an agent. Anything else, Jace?
No, and I don't know if there's a place on your slides later for this, only because Daniel brought it up earlier, and it touches on there a little bit about financing staging, the different ways you can go about doing so.
It actually doesn't. I don't think it's in here. So if that is something I have on my list to have you talk about, you can certainly do it now if you want.
Yeah. So in regards to financing the staging, having that conversation. So, Daniel gave us one example, which I commend you, Daniel, that you're willing to do that. For Daniel, he just considers that a business expense. It's part of his marketing, but it's his value proposition. And so he'll cover that expense, assuming, certain agreements are made on terms and things. So that's definitely one way you can do it. You can finance it yourself. Another way is, where it is a marketing expense to the seller, and the seller pays the staging expense. I've seen other agents where they split it with the seller 50-50. And I've seen other situations where the agent has paid for it up front, with the understanding that the seller will reimburse the agent upon close of escrow. So those are all different ways of financing the project. Great.
So Gabrielle asked a question, what's the average cost of a stager? So do you want to address that, Jace? Do you know about other, because I know you do your own.
Yeah. So, and Isla can probably chime in on this as well. So from what I've seen, it's just a cost for the individual project. So, there isn't a cost per square foot, or, it's this much for a 3-bedroom and this much for a 2-bedroom. I mean, floor plans are all so different, so unique. And so the furnishings needed are going to be unique. And then there's other factors too. So I do staging on the side for other realtors, and besides the actual furnishings and the floor plan, other points that I do charge extra for is, here on Oahu market, there are certain neighborhoods that hillside communities, you have to walk 100 stairs just to get to the front door. And then it's a 3-story house. So if that's the case, I'm charging, definitely there's an upcharge for that. Or, if it's a walk up, or, there's other things like that. So with that, there's no set price. It's per job. So most stagers, including myself, will just do a free estimate. So, they can give you a ballpark figure, if they have photographs, if it's currently listed and vacant and listed before, I can give you a ballpark. But otherwise, it's not until I walk the property will I be able to determine the cost. Having said that, to give you an idea of what prices are here on Oahu, so for a comprehensive staging where you're doing the full-on staging, it could be anywhere as cheap as $1,500 to my most expensive project was like $6,000. So it just depends. And there is no cost. Someone asked in the chat, is there a price difference if it's a $200,000 listing versus $1 million listing? Me personally, no. Again, it all comes down to how much furnishings and decor is needed, how much, what other factors and variables, how much time is it going to take? And that's what determines the price, not the price point.
Yeah, here too, it's kind of a case-by-case basis, and really what the property looks like and what level of staging you're doing, right? Where you talked about your 3 tiers. Because we've had, things can vary greatly based on, the other thing is the inventory of the stager or whether they need to rent, because we don't have a lot of stagers, number one, on Maui, and the ones that we do don't really have a lot of inventory. And so we often are in a situation where they're renting, they're renting furniture, or they're pulling furniture from other sources, like an interior design company or something. And then you're paying for the cost of their consult, their expertise and them, or if they need people to move stuff, right, then that's part of the cost. So if you have big pieces that are being moved by somebody who's like a mover, right, then there's the cost of that. There's the cost of renting the furniture, and depending on how long you have it. And you don't know when that home is going to sell. You might have an idea. So yeah, project by project. I mean, I think it is kind of tough to say. Deb is saying on the Big Island, she's saying she's seen 300 for a tiny condo to 5,000 for luxury homes. She considers it a marketing expense. Alina, okay, so yeah, he was answering your question, Alina, about the 200 to 300 price range. Would you hire one? So again, yeah, I mean, I would say if you really want that property to be showcased in its best light, regardless of the price point, and sell faster and for more, it will work, right? It can work. So absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, to that effect, the least expensive property I've staged was an $80,000 leasehold studio. And there were other listings that had been on the market for forever. And we staged that unit and it sold within, 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, price point, that shouldn't determine, it's what the results, what results do you want should determine whether or not you want to stage it.
Yeah, I mean, what might be a factor, I guess, as you just brought up, there were other comparable properties on the market. If you have a really hot property, like if inventory is super tight, I don't know, you can tell me if you ever make an exception like this, Jason, but say inventory is super tight, the seller is really moving away from staging, you have a prime hot property that's going to come on the market with no competition that you expect to get multiple offers in the first couple of days, maybe okay, right? Maybe not. Maybe then you don't do it in a situation like that.
So me personally, because that's the reputation that I've built,
Yeah.
And that is what I'm known for. Even if that's the case, no, I would still do it anyways, because it's who I am. It's my product. And it was like something you were saying earlier. People get to know my listings by how they look. And yeah, I take
That's why I
pride in
asked, because I
listing.
would expect that you would say you would do it no matter what, that
Yeah,
you never
never.
make an exception.
No.
Cheryl is asking, how do you work with an occupied property? So I'm guessing, Cheryl, you mean a tenant, like you have a tenant in there and you have to deal with that situation and their stuff.
Yeah, so if it's a tenant situation, then yeah, our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do about that. If the property is owner occupied, then it would be, again, we would offer those tiers that we did before. Tier 1, the decluttering, depersonalizing, rearranging of furniture. Tier 2 is the blend. And that's pretty much it. Those would be the 2 options.
Yeah, I think there are things you can do where the seller can incentivize potentially the tenant depending on their situations and how they cooperate. I mean, they have to cooperate for their lease, but how they cooperate with showings and what they do in terms of decluttering and putting things away. I mean, there's some maybe level 1 things that I've seen people have really good success doing in how they work with the tenant, or if the agent develops a good relationship and speaks one-to-one with the tenant. Again, depending on their situation, and maybe can help them find a place that they are going to. But really, as far as full staging, yeah, that's tough.
And Lisa,
Yeah.
one other point I think that's important to mention is that some companies do an initial staging fee and then they'll do a monthly, right? So if you have a property that may be difficult to sell, like we just sold one right on a blind corner going into Lanikai from Kalapawai Market, if anybody knows that area of Kailua. Very difficult driveway to get in and out of. And we were in escrow 3 different times on that property. And that ended up really dragging out our time that we had to lease the, basically it's a lease after the first initial consultation. So just be careful if you have a difficult property to sell that you could end up spending a lot more money than you think on staging, depending on what the setup is for how the staging company finances their deals.
Got it. Great. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, so to address that, because it was also asked in the chat. So yeah, so most stagers, myself included, so the cost is a flat fee, and it's typically for a specified amount of time. So my flat fee is a flat fee for up to 3 months. I know that there are some stagers that will do a flat fee for up to 1 month. And then if you opt to keep the staging thereafter, it switches over to a month to month. So in my instance, flat fee for 3 months, whether your listing sells in 1 week or it takes those 3 months, that's the cost of the service, period. And then if it takes longer than 3 months, you can go month to month thereafter. So to address one of the other, Cheryl asked, do you stage just for photos? I can, and a stager can, but the expense is going to be exactly the same whether they do it for a photo or you keep it, because the amount of work doesn't change just because it's only for a photo. So the price is the price.
It's a good question, though. I mean, I think maybe that part of that question, if it was a tenant situation and you could rearrange things to be able to take pictures that show it in a better light. I mean, you have to be a little careful because we have to, our duty is in terms of MLS and providing photos, it has to look like the property. I mean, but when you're dealing with stuff, I guess, you know, that's an option. You could potentially do that or make it look a little bit better on the day you take the photos.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to do it for rentals, especially if they're your own rentals. So, you know, you can take, you can stage it and have photography done and then just have them pull the staging. It's worth every penny because your listing will lease for so much more.
Totally. Love it. Great idea. Okay. Gabriella says, okay, historically I've taken a day to empty clutter. Okay. So she's answering Cheryl. Patty asked, do you ever ask what the seller's budget might be? And does this help form an estimate at all based on for the property? Do you guys have that budget conversation? Jace,
again, and every stager is different, so I'll speak on my behalf. So, you know, there are stagers that provide different levels of staging. And how I run my business, you know, I am a comprehensive staging. So, you know, this is the price for the project, take it or leave it. I can't, you know, let's take out pieces or not as many furnishings or don't do any art and can we make it cheaper that way? Yeah, I don't do that. It's, you know, I have a vision. This is what it's going to take and this is the price. Someone had asked earlier about virtual staging.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent question. I think that was Robert. So is virtual staging cheaper than real life staging? Oh yes, significantly cheaper. There are some resources out there right now that you send a photograph. I'm laughing. I just saw Isla's comment. I feel the same way, but the question was asked and we need to discuss it. So yes, it's cheaper. You know, you take a photograph, you submit it to a company, and they go ahead and do the virtual staging. So advantages and disadvantages. The only advantage is that it's cheap, and it makes your property look nice. You do have to disclose it, so you have to, by MLS guidelines, at least here on Oahu, you have to provide a photograph of your stage and indicate that it's virtually staged, and then you have to show the real life. So the real benefit is just it's cheaper, and yeah, it'll look nice in photographs when the buyer is looking at it, and it'll get them to the property. But again, the whole objective is staging is that emotional connection again. And so when you have your buyers walk through the property, they're expecting this gorgeous staged home, and they come in and it's empty and the carpets are stained and there's no life to it. It may end up hurting you than helping you. So yes, it's an option, but I personally don't care for it at all. I think is misrepresentation, and that's me personally.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that stuff in the comments too. You guys are having great conversations. I love it. I was cracking up about the toilet lid. So if you're not seeing the chat box, it's a whole nother class in there. But yeah, I think that that's what everybody's saying and they agree to. That was a really good question about virtual staging, because I think that some people, we don't see it super often here. However, there are certain parts of the country where I think it's, you know, more prevalent. Okay, oh, before we go on, I just wanted to go back to your page 27 in your workbook before we go to evaluate. And it just asks a question. It says, who's gonna do the staging consultation? And just circle one, whether it's gonna be you, or it says employee or team member, somebody else, or a professional stager. And then it says, what are you going to do to either prepare yourself or your stager to work at a high level? So if you have any comments or questions, I just wanna make sure you do that exercise. And then any comments or questions about that, feel free to share. And we're gonna move on to, Isla says, staging is tax deductible for the sellers. Okay, well, that's good. Tell them, talk to their tax person, but that's good to know that it could, like, basically if they do it and that's part of their expense, that sounds like a cool benefit. And, yeah, just have them confirm that. I think that's great. Okay, so evaluate the house. Let's talk about that. Review the property, make the appointment to go through the home as soon as possible after the listing agreement has been signed. That's why it was recommending that you actually, if you are gonna have somebody stage, that they come. They're there at the end of your, that's part of your listing appointment. You get them to sign the docs and you have that person there, which would be great. Or you can just schedule it as soon as possible. Ideally, review the property when the sellers are not at home. This was a really good note, interesting when I was going through the material again, that I liked. If they're not there, that's better. So the evaluation will go more quickly and you can actually like do the job. Like it can get long, time consuming and more complicated with them there. So
Absolutely. Not only for the consultation, but also for the implementation. So for me, you know, the staging is a creative process. So for me, you know, when I walk into a property, immediately I have a vision and I have an overall master plan. But having said that, the actual execution of certain pieces, it's a process. You know, I may put, you know, I know which furniture I want in this room, but I may put it over here, set it up this way, and you know what? No, that doesn't work for me, and so I'll move it this way. So it's a process. Or I'll bring in some decor pieces, and you know what? I don't like how the colors are not blending, so I may change it. So when a homeowner is home during this whole process, you know, they're more out of curiosity. They're there, you know, they're over your shoulder, but they're asking questions. Or I did a project for another agent recently with another firm, and the seller was home the entire time, and so I brought in all of my decor and had not set it up. And the missus saw the decor and she called her agent freaking out that the colors, everything was horrible, and she was livid. So, you know, he told her, hey, just let him do his thing. So we got done, and by the time we got done, she loved it. She said she never would have put those colors and pieces together, and she absolutely loved it. She was calling her girlfriends, taking pictures, having people come over, and that property actually sold within a week, and she raved about us thereafter. So yeah, having them around, it's better if they're not around, because then it'll just expedite the process faster.
Find out what they like to do and help them do it during that time. Obviously when coronavirus rules or whatever, but you know, yeah. It'd be great if we could go to movies. Okay, so review the property, curb appeal, we talked about that, inside the home, the layout, extra furnishings, if you're gonna put those in, the rooms that are painted, bright colors or have a strong wallpaper that won't have mass appeal, clutter, imbalance, light. Those are three big main things that you're looking for. Flooring for wear or bad color patterns, ceilings, baseboards, windows, and doors for cracks. And then make your recommendations. It says email your recommendations to the seller within 24 hours. And to help ease the process for them, you can supply a calendar to show each stage what you're doing, the deadline, and list of your subcontractors. And this just isn't for staging alone. I mean, they're including all the other stuff that you would typically talk to a seller about in prepping their home to help you, right? To help you and them do a better job. Hold your sellers accountable. So if they said they're going to do something, this is why you put this stuff on paper and you give them the list and the checklist, hold them accountable to doing that work, remind them about the conversations you had. You can formalize the arrangement and the listing agreement. So this was an interesting thing, which I wanted to chat a little bit about. It said in the section titled special provisions or special terms, it says leave the date blank and write this phrase. The listing will go on the market and in the MLS on the date the agent determines the house is ready. Now, per our MLS guidelines, that may not be doable or allowable in terms of inputting the listing and wanting to have that signed by all parties. So I don't know what you have on Oahu or what the rules are on the Big Island, but is there anything like this that you've done, Jason? Okay, so can you tell me about what you've been able to do and what works?
Yeah. So okay. So for those of you that don't know me, I have been affiliated with a few different brokerages here on Oahu. And so I would recommend that you obviously, talk to your BIC or PB first. So I worked in one brokerage where, yeah, it was exactly like this. So we put it under the special terms of the listing agreement. The listing agreement date was the date that we signed the agreement, so that I locked them in, and that way I can now advise them and know that I'll be compensated. But then we put a comment similar to this, that once the house was staged and the photograph was ready, that would be, that would determine our live date. And that satisfied one brokerage. So the brokerage that I'm with now, they actually have an addendum that addresses this, where you put the listing agreement for the date that you actually get it signed and when you establish that relationship, and then on the addendum there's a line that says, and I usually leave it blank until I'm ready to go live, where seller authorizes it to go live on this specific date.
Okay, so then on the list, so sorry, I might have missed this, you might have said it. So on the list date, do you leave that blank and then this becomes the list date?
So no, on the list date, I put the date that we actually signed the listing, the listing agreement.
Okay.
That once they hired me, that date that I'm sitting there, I lock them in so that, I secure that listing.
Okay, got it. Okay. So I would say, because rules, like you said, are different, brokerage guidelines and then also MLS guidelines, it's something to just check. But I think in concept, it's a great idea. Yep. If there's a way that you can make it work, because again, it really makes it part of what you guys are doing, and it's part of the listing, so to speak. Okay, let's go on to implementation. Isla says that verbiage is on one of the forms she can share. That's great. So yeah, Isla, if you want to send, what we can do is, as long as everybody on this call RSVP'd, which I think you did. I think you had to register to join this call. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you did register to join this call, then we can send out this stuff to the registration list. So that way, so Isla, you can send that stuff to me. Cheryl, can you put my email in there for Isla too? Okay, let's talk about implementation on page, thank you.
Hey, Lisa, can I ask a quick question of Jason?
Totally.
Because I'm trying to remember what the answer is myself. Jason, do your days on market start with the listing, the signature of the listing, or does it start when you actually go live? I believe it starts when you go live, which is why it's important to make that distinction.
Okay, so it is my understanding, and any of the other BICs could chime in on this. So it is based on when okay, so Okay, back up. I got to answer that one of two ways. So first of all, once the listing agreement is fully executed, you have X number of days that you have to go live. Once it's executed, and if I remember correctly, I believe it was 3 days. And so it's based on from when it's fully executed, the date of the secondary signature of when it's executed is what in essence would be your starting date.
But it
Yeah,
is within 3 days then.
She's
Do I
saying it's
understand that right?
it's within 3 days.
Correct. Yep, that's MLS guideline. It has to
Okay.
be, once it's fully executed, you have to be live, I think, within 3 days.
Yeah,
So-
I always had a difficulty with that one because let's say you have a listing that's going to take 2 weeks to get ready, you know? I just thought that was a bizarre ruling from the MLS, but just my
Yeah,
two
so
cents.
just don't have your broker sign off on it. So
Right.
like the brokerage I am currently, you know, there are certain brokerage guidelines to get sort of a pre-approval for you to go ahead and have seller sign off on it. So seller will sign off on it, and then the BIC won't sign off that final execution until you're ready to go live.
So this is a good conversation. I mean, the reason I asked that, that's why I was saying talk to your broker and based on the MLS guidelines that you have, because Maui's different, right? It used to be that it was you had to enter it in the MLS after the parties signed. Now we have the list date and it can be later. So that's why I mentioned that clause could be tricky because you may not have that flexibility to make a decision about when it goes in the MLS, depending on what your contract says. So, and depending on what your MLS rules are, or you may have to do an exemption or something like that, and then your days on market are going to run. So that's exactly why I mentioned talk to your brokers about that clause. So that's a great question. Okay, so a couple of questions. I just understood what was okay, so everybody was a little confused about that conversation. All right, implementation. Overall considerations. So buzzwords. I love these buzzwords. This is on your page 33, I think, 33. Lighter, brighter, more spacious. Those are good buzzwords. And then overall considerations are declutter, which Jason mentioned, clean, right? The cleanliness, maintenance and repair, and creating an atmosphere or feeling, like Jason says, he gets like a vision of what that's going to look like. And then entryway, living room, kitchen, and master bedroom are really key areas when we're looking at impact, right? Entryway, living room, kitchen, and master bedroom. Tell me if you think that there's additional ones to add there. One of the key skills, Gary Keller says, of a successful real estate agent is mastering the basics of how homes should be presented and staged properly. Okay, overall considerations continued, simple staging consultation versus extensive services. So Jason kind of gave us 3 tiers, which is what I was going to ask you here. So that's already been given, which I think is fantastic and really good for us to use as a model. This is what they're kind of saying is removing clutter, cleaning, maybe some painting or touching up, rearranging furniture to create space and flow. And then more extensive would be adding on home repair, potentially putting in flooring, window treatments. Like how big is this going to get? Upgraded kitchen features you might have if something's old, renting furniture and plants. Those are some possibilities. Pets. So keep food areas and litter boxes fastidiously cleaned, right? We really don't want to have, if it's tenant occupied or owner occupied, we don't like to have like stinky litter boxes. That's pretty much a quick turnoff for a buyer. Open houses and showing appointments, the doggy and doggy daycare, and leave the cat outside as long as it's an outdoor cat. If it's an indoor cat, do not let that cat out, or crated indoors or in some room or that you're not going to show. Small children, talks about children, their 3 favorite toys and put the others in storage so you don't have stuff all over the place. Teens should remove all personal photos and take down their posters. So you mentioned this, Jason, anything personalizing that's not where the buyer can see themselves in that property is not advantageous, right? To have stuff that is personal.
Correct. Just because we don't want to risk alienating a prospective buyer unnecessarily.
Yep. Make a good first impression and how important that is. This is also on your page 36. There's a longer list in there. I think painting or replacing the front door, making sure the doorbell works if there is a doorbell. I don't know. We don't have a lot of doorbells here. Do you guys have doorbells on Oahu? Is that like common or no? No? Okay.
For homes, they are.
I think
Huh?
so.
For homes, they are common. Condos, not necessarily.
Okay, okay. Clean and polish all door hardware, replace altogether doorknob, kick plate, house numbers. And I like this. I think this is really important because we may tend to spend a lot of time on the interior of the home and the curb appeal. Again, I mean, when you look at first impressions and being able to stage effectively, it really is the first thing they see driving up to the property. That whole entryway, that is critical. And a lot of times, I mean, I've fought people on the importance of like replacing a rusty screen door or something that's broken right in that front before you even walk in the property. And that is that can be really not helpful because you're already working from a disadvantaged position there and showing. Welcome mat, potted plants. You want that entry to be welcoming, repair cracks on paving and stairs, clean windows, and keep the entry swept and clean. Okay, so decluttering and cleaning, and then we're gonna look at your checklist here. On your page 37, it says 2 most important steps in staging, and tell me if you agree, Jason, is the decluttering and the cleaning. So, because that really was your stage 1, was like the decluttering, right? Because that is at minimum what you wanna do. And then keep on track through the use of checklists. So the checklist in your guide, I wanted you guys to look at. Start on page, it talks about the checklist on 37, and then you have a decluttering checklist on 38, 39, which goes into outside, entryway, kitchen, bathrooms, bedrooms, living and dining room, attic, we don't have a lot of basements here, or garage. And then you also have your checklist on page 41, which is outside cleaning. So this is cleaning throughout the house. You have cleaning entryway, bedrooms, bathrooms, and kitchen. And then there's also a checklist regarding maintenance items on page 43, 44, 3 and 44. And then creating the atmosphere, you have checklists on that too. So I included all that so you have all of that great stuff in here. And then this is just some of what it talks about in terms of decluttering. It's part of our lives, but it works against the sellers when they're trying to sell their house. The clutter is, and buyers react better to open spaces. And it says 1 hidden benefit to decluttering is that your sellers will be halfway done with their packing by the time they finish. That's a great benefit. You can tell them and they don't have to rush to do it, right? And then there's some cute little tips in here too. So on the cleaning, again, we talked about hiring a professional, somebody doing deep cleaning and maintenance work. Then all they have to do is the lighter cleaning for showings. And then it goes on to talk about maintenance. Again, this is all in your booklet. Maintenance, maybe calling in subcontractors, and then creating an atmosphere. So Jason, maybe you can speak to this and what you do in addition to the staging. Do you do any of the atmospheric stuff on like mood, music, lighting? I mean, I know you use props, so tell me if you do any of this for showings.
If it's my own listing, yes. So I like to show up prior to my listings. And how much time prior depends on my family, because on that note of cleanliness, people have different perceptions of what clean means. And so depending on my client's perception will determine how much more time I'm gonna need to spend prepping as needed. But yes, of course, natural lighting, opening all the curtains, the blinds, letting as much natural light in, that makes a space feel, more friendly, more clean. Music, I use air fresheners, the plug-in kind. So if they have an animal, I'm, as you heard, I have a dog, so I'm a dog owner. And sometimes we just get accustomed to our own funk. So it's nice having, air fresheners. I keep a case of them in my truck. And so I'll put them in my listings so that, there's a nice welcoming aroma when buyers come in.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the example it gave here. Like if there's a good light in a particular corner, place a chair with a throw cover, an open book to suggest how relaxing the room is.
Mhm.
Breakfast tray on the bed, a collection of spa soaps in the bathroom, towels. Like I love when I see all that stuff in properties. It's so great to give you that feel. And yeah, Daniel mentioned bathroom should be added to the list. It is in the checklist item, so you'll see the bathroom in there. Just going back to see if there's anything I missed. Deb says, I pay to change the front door lock as agents having trouble getting in. We don't want struggling with keys, the first impression. That's true. Febreze, heavy duty. That's good. Home Depot. Okay. All right. And then diffusing essential oils. Livette does that. That's great.
Yep.
Good, you guys. I remember the whole cookie movement. You guys remember that when everybody was baking cookies? And then they came up with like fake cookie baking aroma. People were actually giving them away and having people eat them. And then they just started putting like fake. Okay.
Yeah,
So we went over-
essential oils, real quick, those work really, really well. If the property is occupied and you would like to use some essential oils, just have a really quick, brief conversation with your sellers that no one is allergic in any way to smells. I've had certain clients that they were sensitive to that sort of stuff, and I learned the hard way. Lesson learned once.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, just make sure that no one has any issues with it before you do so.
I think that's a good question, or an important question too. Great. So we talked about the checklist, went through those. So let's go to staging an empty house, which is our last section here before we get to the end. So why stage an empty house? Don't leave rooms empty when selling a house. Empty houses lead buyers to question why the house is vacant. Again, you just want them to focus on the good things and the positive things and seeing themselves in there. That's not always the case, but that's the idea behind it. And then this is a really key one that I like and completely agree with, is that size is difficult to visualize when a room is empty. And you see that a lot where people, like, I've had showings where the same property over and over again, and one set of buyers are like, this room is tiny. And then another set of buyers is like, wow, this room is big. That's perspective and that's relative too. But when you have furniture to mark all of that, and I think most cases, it also makes things look bigger, right, Jason?
That's huge, Lisa, because one objection that I get a lot is, if the space is compact, agents and or sellers may be apprehensive about staging it because they're like, oh, we don't want to make the space look smaller than it is. And that's actually where it's needed even more so. So if you have a very large space or a very small space, or you have a space where there's we have two condominium projects here in town that they have just odd shaped rooms. These are spaces that they actually can benefit from staging more so, because then by the use of furnishings, you could show potentially the best use for that room, and it's very, very effective. So don't be scared, guys, of small spaces or big spaces. That's when you need it the most.
Yeah, I like that they're odd shaped rooms you talked about. Sometimes, you have to be creative for them, because a lot of times buyers don't have that ability to visualize or that creativity to see how a room can be used. And then they'll just say, I can't use this. I don't know what to do with this. Or I can't fit my X in here, whatever that X is, piece of furniture. And then they see it and they go, wow, they did a great job with use of space. Okay, I see how I could use this, and it's possible. And that's not to be confused with, I think a lot of people misunderstand the idea of having neutral, where neutral sells versus really bold colors or things like that. I think that the staging, and maybe you can go into how you do the staging, but a lot of that goes away when you do the staging, right? That idea of that neutrality. If you're dealing with an empty space and you're not staging, that's different. Then you don't want an orange wall in there.
Right. And so that, you know, I was actually going to talk about this a little bit later, but yeah, so, you know, that now you're starting to get more so into a specific style. So, you know, if you're talking about monochromatic versus, you know, leveraging colors, is one better than the other? I say it depends, you know. So I have a listing now that just went into escrow where the homeowners were very monochromatic. Everything was, you know, white, very light, you know, colors. Whereas most of my staging is very colorful. I love to play with color and pops of color. And it didn't, you know, my inventory and her style just did not work. And so we came up with you know a alternative that worked, and the end product, it was gorgeous even though it was monochromatic. So again, it's more about how you leverage your pieces and what you're working with. You can still get the same pop result whether you're not using color or you are. On that note, though, I think that one thing that's very important, guys, if you are doing your own staging, is there needs to be a consistency in your design, in your palette. So just because you buy a bunch of nice, pretty stuff from Ross or TJ Maxx or wherever, and you put it in a property, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. So make sure that it all blends. So, you know, I have built my inventory where all of my art pieces, all of my bedding, all of my plates, everything, all of the decor, it all blends. So no matter what property type I'm staging, where I'm staging, how much staging that property requires, I can still, my inventory will work because I'm keeping a certain color palette, a certain style and theme consistent, and it's cohesive. So you know, keep it consistent because it'll flow better when you do so.
Awesome. Thank you. And then 3, without furnishings, buyers will get bogged down in negative details. Like, this is so true, right? If the only thing in the room is a stain on the carpet, I mean, like, there's no furniture in there, and that's, you know, like, that's what they're going to focus on, right? They're just not going to see anything else. So, so I like that. Continuing, refer to your checklist, follow the same procedures as you would for an occupy home, omit the jobs that have anything to do with the furnishings and belongings. And then it says rent furniture and add pictures, sell flowers, cushions to create a warm, lived-in look, not like messed up, but, you know, just kind of seeing themselves or somebody being able to live there, and then arrange for light maintenance. So any key things, Jason, on what you do for lighting? Lighting is critical. I mean, especially when you're dealing with a property that's dark, it doesn't have a lot of natural light. So what are some of the things that you do?
So before I address that light,
Yep.
that bullet point, I want to address bullet point number 2, guys. So for those of you who want to do staging and just can't afford us, you know, spending thousands of dollars on a stager or whatever because the seller doesn't want to pay for it. So, and this is going back to Daniel's point that he made earlier. So when I first started doing staging, I owned enough furniture, enough dining sets, living room sets, bedroom sets to furnish 10 4-bedroom houses at one time. So I had all this furniture. I had a huge warehouse, and it was a lot of work. And it was a huge expense. And so a couple years ago, I changed my strategy. And here on Oahu, there is a sort of a rent-to-own sort of company called Color Time. And that guys is who I use to get my big pieces. So as far as living room furniture, dining room sets and all of that stuff, it's very, very economical. So they too do a minimum 3-month rental.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about it is if you rent furniture from them and your listing sells and you have another listing, they'll move the furniture for you to your new listing since you've already prepaid for the 3 months.
Cool.
But doing that, guys, you know, if you feel comfortable with the small decor and you have that inventory, you just don't have the big stuff, that's an option for you guys. You can go to Color Time, you can rent your living room furniture and your dining room furniture, and it's very economical.
Awesome. Okay, a couple
So-
lighting tips.
Yeah, so lighting tips. So yes, of course, I love to incorporate, I mentioned this before, natural lighting as much as possible. So if there's windows, you know, make sure that everything is open. And if there isn't any natural lighting, then absolutely supplement with artificial light, whether that's, you know, a lamp, whether that's a floor lamp, standing lamp, such as the one behind me, or if you're using lamps on your end tables in your living room or end tables in a bedroom or whatever, yeah, use lighting.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So on your
Hey,
page,
Lisa.
yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in on that one because a lot of times when we're going through houses and they have, you know, a lot of times in the bathrooms, there's old rusty type of lighting or something like that. We recommend for them to replace those types of lighting. You know, they're not very expensive. And I think I saw a stat at one point from NAR that said your return on lighting is 1,000%. So we do recommend for people to change out fixtures a lot of times, especially if they're dated.
That's great. Yeah, fixtures in general make a huge difference, and they are cost effective. So that's
Another
awesome.
thing too on lighting that I totally forgot, and I'm so sorry, is another thing that's super huge is the type of light bulb, guys. So whether warm light, cool light, they're the old energy efficient lights, the ones that take 2 minutes to warm up and brighten up. Those are horrible. Like, yes, they're energy efficient, but change them out. Like, get some bright white, bright light as opposed to that warm yellowish tone. The brighter, whiter tone makes this space and rooms look better. But yeah, change out the light bulbs, guys. Real inexpensive fix.
Love that. So in your book, you do have some scripts in there as well about staging, explaining staging, and back to the as is conversation. Actually, some of these might be repeated. That might be repeated. Okay. Staging is not about trying to put lipstick on a pig. You don't want your sellers to disguise problems or mask flaws. You want them to show their home in its best possible light, clean, decluttered, and repair-free. Buyers should only see what is right with the house, not get focused on what is wrong. Tony DeCello, who's a head of MAPS coaching, or one of the heads of MAPS coaching, says price gets you in the game and staging gets you the offer. And I loved that, because price, when we're talking about the listing and pricing that, and then the staging gets you the offer because they're seeing it. It's already attracted them because of the price point of the property. So love that. Flash lights are the worst. Anne Marie asks if you put any lights on timers.
I usually do not know.
Okay. Okay, we talked about the scripts. Okay, so now we're going to get into your action plan, and then we'll have another Q&A with Jason at the end. The first thing that I want you guys to do, though, is go to your page 55, which is 55 and 56 in your booklet. And this is what we do at the end of each session, is to come up with an action plan. So again, you have a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I have no experience with this, 5 being I'm an expert, and you're going to rate yourself in each of the challenge categories, which there's 7 of them, and you're going to rate yourself 1 through 5, depending on where you're at, and then anything that you're a 3 or less, to put an action item in place. Now you can do some of it as your homework, although I want you guys to at least do the ratings right now and put 1 action step in minimum. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. And then I'm going to ask you to share something. So be prepared, get ready to unmute or type. And 7 would be if you're with another brokerage, it would just be setting goals and then sharing them with whoever is managing you and whoever your leadership is. So Jace, while we're waiting for everybody to finish, and I want a couple of people to share, do you have, can you put in the chat box, like, do you have a website that shows some of your staging products, or maybe you can, I don't know if you want to share your screen and pull up some pictures before we go. I'd love to see if you can show, or you can send them to me and I can share. Is there a website that people could go to see your stuff?
I do not have a website.
Okay. You're all word of mouth.
Yeah, well, because I do staging on the side for other agents, I like to maintain my real estate separate because I'm there as the role of a stager. I don't want to blur that.
Right.
So yeah, anytime an agent or an agent's seller asks for examples of work, like you suggested earlier, so I'll send videos of either my listings that I've done or photographs or whatever. I'll just send them directly.
Okay. Well, and if you have a listing or something that you want us to look at, it would be fun to kind of check something out. So let's, what'd you guys come up with? Where do you have opportunity? Where are you at 3 or less? And what is your action step for that? Deb, planning on having someone else assist with staging, though I've been doing it for a long time. I'll give up my furniture storage. Spend more time designing. I love it. Okay, great.
I love it.
Awesome. Who else has one? How are you guys feeling in terms of your ability to have conversations with sellers about staging? I mean, was this helpful for you to be able to have the conversations, to have the checklists, all of those things? Anne Marie?
Yeah. Yeah, this is really, really valuable, Jason. I'm so glad to see all the things that you do here. I asked about the timers because I'm from a state where it got dark really early. So we always had timers and nobody had to worry about turning lights on or off. But for me, because I'm so fresh to the islands, I just need more listings to play, and run around to shops and stores and look and see what people are doing. But I do appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Beth says, Tactic 8, standing out from the competition. Can we chat real quick about photography best practices regarding virtual tours? Yeah, we can. We have a couple of minutes if you want to. Beth, do you just want Jason to talk about what he does in terms of getting like the highest quality of photography to show the staging well and virtual tours?
Yes, lighting.
Okay.
So in regards to that, that's an excellent question, Beth. And it's one that I actually feel very passionate about. So obviously our product is the home that we're selling. So I find it extremely discouraging and upsetting when a new listing hits the market and you can tell that the agents, photographed themselves with their cell phone and not even attempt to do it well. It's just such a disservice to the consumer, and it just looks so poorly. Considering, guys, again, our showings do not begin when the buyers walk in through the front door of our properties. Our showings begin when they're sitting at home, laying in bed, scrolling on their phone or their iPads, checking out, the photographs of the properties. So with that, me personally, I think that is one of the most important investments that on the listing side that we can do. when we take on a listing is the photographs, because yeah, that's what's going to determine whether or not we're going to get them in through the front door. So
Yeah.
So there is a particular photographer that I work with that I just love. You know, I like to take more of a cinematic approach and storytelling approach to my photographs, to my videos. And so there's one particular, you know, after working with many different photographers and videographers, there's one that I found that she gets me. Like, we get each other and we work really, really well. And for me, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, it could be a little bit pricey. I know, you know, some agents, for those of you that are starting out new and you don't have a lot of money to invest in your listing, you know, you may opt for a more inexpensive option. And not to say that that's good or bad, but photographs are everything. And that is one of the areas that I do not hesitate to spend my money, because that's what's going to be the most compelling to the buyer consumer.
Yeah, everybody's echoing how important it is to have good photography. Daniel was saying it, HBR should require it, that everybody uses it. Price we get depends on how many people come through the door and depends on photos. Please make sure a photographer will move the walker in the middle of the room or the toilet seat down. Yeah, that's good. And then another recommendation.
Lisa, it happened. Lisa?
Yeah.
It happened.
I figured.
My clients were elderly and in the house, and they moved from room to room so the photographer could take the pictures, and they left the walker, and the guy wouldn't move it. Consequently, I never hired him again, but it happened.
Interesting. Joelle, you have a question?
Yes, sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's difficult to type it.
That's okay.
First, I wanted to say I like how you guys spoke about using stats to kind of back up the value behind staging a property. I thought that was good, and I really liked the recommendation of kind of, excuse my boyfriend, he's fixing my bike. I like the negotiation tool of I'll pay for the staging if you price the property accordingly. So that kind of incentivizes them. And then 80% of marketing is price, right? So, and then when you have a staging, I'm sure it's even better. So my question is, how do you provide the metrics to prove, let's say you stage a home and you have the seller pay for it, and then it doesn't close that far above maybe a rest of what's sold around it, what would be the conversation to have after the fact with your seller, kind of letting them know, hey, I didn't let you down, it's still, you know, sold for a good amount? Like, what happens when it's not the most idealistic situation when it comes to getting the return on your investment for staging it? And how do you calculate the metrics? Let's say even it did close over what maybe some of the other houses in that same market are closing for. How do you calculate that metric to kind of show that it wasn't the fact that the square footage was more, it was based on the fact that you listened to me and we staged it? So that's the main thing.
That's an excellent question. So, you know, I've never run into that situation, to be honest, where we didn't have the results that we wanted, or that they came back and were like, hey, it didn't sell X percentage more than what we could have, or X. I've never had that experience. So I think whether we stage or not, guys, you know, communication and constant communication with our clients is really, really important. I mean, of all the studies NAR has done, that's the #1 complaint against us as an industry, is that we don't communicate with our clients. So that communication, having that upfront, candid communication, setting expectations upfront, and then doing so during the process, I think will eliminate all of that. So, you know, me personally, and I know this is sort of getting off topic a little bit, and I apologize about that, Lisa. So with my listings, I set up an appointment and I set an expectation with my clients that we're going to touch bases every single Monday on everything that happened the previous week. So we're going to review any showings, any open houses, any feedback received. We're going to go over how the market is performing, because especially now, guys, the market is so fluid. It's shifting. We need to stay on top of the market and make sure that we're not chasing it, but rather that we're staying ahead of it. So you know, going over the market stats and seeing to make sure that we're still competitive, because the staging is only one component of the overall marketing strategy, guys. So it's the staging, it's the pricing, it's another thing that I'm passionate about, and it's a whole nother story, is actually that real estate story. So the story that you're telling, guys, to describe your properties. Oh, I think that's so huge and under leveraged tool, where you go into the public remarks and it's just a 3-bedroom house with square footage, blah, blah, blah. Like, tell a story, guys, do something compelling. So anyways, if you're having those conversations with your clients, and you're finding that you're not getting the results you want, it's not necessarily because of the staging, it's something else, and you should be addressing that anyways. So not sure if that answers your question.
Can I chime in on that too?
Yes. Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, so the way I explain it again, Lisa, I think that's important. Just like Jason was saying, as far as having a conversation up front, I tell them the elements to really selling any house or product, which is your home.
Mm-hmm.
So if we stage it, it's going to look as good as it's going to get. And then your marketing plan, you're presenting to them, you're showing them all the things that you're doing, all the places that are your home is going to show up. You know, all the additional items you're doing, calling, circle prospecting, so on and so forth. So those two elements are already really locked in. So when you're not getting the results that you should achieve by the days on market that you should have those results in, then there's only one thing usually that's the issue, and that's the price.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, you're setting up the expectation up front that when that's not coming in, and it may, you know, like we said, prices are fluid, and everyone expects the comps to just be so in line, and that automatically you're always going to have the perfect price. And we all know that it's about, I always tell people, pricing is about 60% data and about 40% art form, you know, so we don't always hit it right on the head. So sometimes if it's your product is perfect and your marketing is out there, that's the only thing that's really hitting is the price.
Yeah, it's definitely the determining factor.
Exactly. So Joel, and that's the point, you know, it doesn't matter how much staging or how beautiful I make a property look. If it's overpriced, it ain't going to sell, period. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've had that situation. So, okay, awesome, you guys. We're going to wrap up. I just want to remind you, so next week, we actually only have 4 sessions left. It'll be a sad day when we're done. We'll have to come up with another training program to start. So next week is creating urgency to buy, and we have another awesome guest next week, which is Rustin Tong, who some of you know, who is a buyer specialist with Tong and Partners in Honolulu, and you know, just kills it with working with buyers. And so he's going to share some of what they're doing, and then we're going to share some really good content for that. And then, so just a couple things to wrap up. One is I'd love to hear a couple of takeaways, ahas that you guys have had that you'll share today. I know some of you have been sharing all along. So if you can give us a couple, and then we will thank Jason. We'll thank you, Jason, anyway, for just sharing so much great information with us and opening up what you do in your business to everybody and being willing to share that. If you can put in the chat box, Jason, how people can reach out to you if they want to, if you're okay with that, that would be great. Your contact information. And yes, okay. Great. Okay, so give me a couple of ahas. What have been your top takeaways today? Give me a couple. I'm not letting you go. You'll have to hang up on me, which is not polite. Okay, Klaus says, oh, Joel, so Ignite was awesome. Klaus says importance of communicating everything with sellers. Totally. And understanding the true value of staging. Yeah, I think that's a big one, Robert, right? Just overall, like how important, because I think a lot of agents don't really understand how valuable it is for the client and for you, for everybody. I mean, it's just such a win. So I agree with that. I think that's a really big one. Aha, Deborah, that you share willingly. Great. And then Jason put his contact information in there. It elevates our industry. Awesome. So any other questions? Well, Jason, why don't we just have them reach out to you because we're getting to 3 o'clock. Is that okay if they have additional
Absolutely.
questions, or is there anything else that you want to say?
No, just thank you guys for this opportunity of having me. I initially was a little bit apprehensive. I wasn't sure, what I could possibly contribute. But thank you for the invite and for letting me share. And I trust you guys walked away with at least 1 or 2 nuggets.
It's been great, Jason. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's been contributing and sharing today. Daniel says you appeal to buyers' emotions, in particular the impulse to buy now, which is, and thank you, Daniel, for sharing as well. And Isla being willing to share all that information. If you want to send that to me, this is how we make our profession better. Yeah. So thanks so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And as always, we send the email out from past sessions if you've missed that. So hopefully you are getting those. And if there's anything else you need, you can reach out to me as well. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a great.
Thank
have a
you,
great rest of
Jason.
your
Thanks,
day.
Luis.
Okay. Bye, you
Take care.
guys.
Bye, Jason.
Bye.
Bye-bye.